Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking an absolutely critical framework for product development success. We're going to take your next big idea and transition it from total guesswork into a rock-solid, data-backed strategy. If you've ever found yourself wondering how the most successful project teams just seem to inherently know exactly what their market wants, well, you are definitely in the right place.
But right off the bat, I want you to really chew on this question. How do you know your new product idea will actually work before you build it? I mean, we've all heard the absolute horror stories in the tech and business worlds, right? Pouring months of time, massive amounts of money, and just endless team energy into building a shiny new feature only to launch it and hear absolute crickets. It is incredibly painful, and frankly, it's a massive waste of resources to build a feature that literally no one wants.
And that is exactly why we rely on feasibility analysis. Basically, it's a method to figure out if your proposed features are actually practical, primarily based on real user feedback. You can kind of think of this as your project's time machine. It's this amazing framework that safeguards your project from failure before you even write a single line of code or spend a single dollar, turning raw user feedback into a genuine strategic superpower.
So to master this, we're going to tackle the four main pillars of the workflow today. 1. Survey and participants. 2. Questionnaire and responses. 3. Sorting out feasible and discarded features. And 4. The SWOT analysis.
All right, diving right into section 1, survey and participants. Who are you building for? Because before you even think about writing a single question, you absolutely must have a crystal clear objective of what you're trying to learn. Once that objective is locked in, you need to know exactly who is talking to you. You can't just throw a survey out into the void and hope for the best. Documenting essential demographic information, things like age, gender, and occupation, is absolutely crucial. After all, you wouldn't ask a 5-year-old for their thoughts on corporate accounting software, right? This just ensures the feedback you get actually aligns with your specific target market. Moving on to section 2, questionnaire and responses. Ask better, build better. Listen, even with the perfect audience, bad questions will inevitably get you bad data. So let's look at the actual art of crafting a good survey. Take a notoriously bad question, like, do you use Food Panda, where the user can only answer yes or no. That severely limits your information because it only gives you one tiny isolated data point. Compare that to a much better approach. Which food delivery app do you use? And giving them options like Uber Eats, Food Panda, and others. That actually identifies real user habits and gives you a panoramic view of the competitive landscape. Notice how a well-crafted question doesn't force the respondent into a box. If you ask a bad question like, do you find the search feature useful? You're forcing the user to focus on a single predetermined feature. A good question just asks them to tick all the features you find most useful. This organic approach lets the user tell you what actually matters to them rather than you leading the witness. Here's one more prime example. Asking, do you think we should implement this feature, in total isolation is almost entirely useless. Without any context, a user might literally just say yes to be polite. But asking respondents to tick the one new feature you would love to see provides a meaningful, direct comparison among a list of possible features. It forces the user to prioritize, which is exactly what your development team needs to do. So, to sum up the core principles of an effective questionnaire, you've got a few golden rules to live by. First, keep it simple and direct. Second, avoid double-barreled questions. That means you should only ever ask for one specific piece of information at a time. And third, avoid leading and loaded questions. Your questions absolutely must be completely neutral and objective so you don't accidentally inject your own bias into the data. Okay, section 3, feasible and discarded features. Let the data decide. This is the fun part, where we transform those raw, messy human opinions into concrete project mandates. Let's see how this plays out using some specific data from a hypothetical food delivery app. When you take your survey responses and convert them into measurable proportions, it instantly reveals what users actually want. Just look at this breakdown. 48% of users want a search feature, 22% want online payment, and 20% fall into an others category. The mystery's totally gone. The numbers are speaking for themselves. And then you take those exact numbers and map them directly to your project roadmap. By using a transparent result table, you connect the survey findings directly to your final decisions. Because search and online payment have strong user support, the decision is a no-brainer. Implement. But look at a proposed schedule feature which only captured 10% of the vote. The decision there? Discard. This perfectly shows how data drives that final shortlisted feature list. Ultimately, Everything lands in one of two distinct buckets. First, your feasible features. These are the ones selected for implementation and backed by hard data. And second, your discarded features, the ones rejected, but always accompanied by a brief explanation as to why you're tossing them out. Which brings us to Section 4, SWOT analysis, the strategic big picture. We've got our features sorted, but now we really need to evaluate the overall viability of the project itself. Now, you're probably somewhat familiar with the SWOT matrix, but let's break down these 4 categories specifically through the lens of feasibility. Strengths and weaknesses represent what is internal to your team, your internal good and internal bad, like your budget or your in-house expertise. Opportunities and threats, on the other hand, represent the external environment, stuff like market conditions, competitors, and economic trends that are completely outside of your direct control. Let's use an example straight from the source material regarding open source project management software to perfectly illustrate these internal characteristics. Looking strictly inside the product itself, its strengths are that it's completely free and benefits from really agile community support. But its internal weaknesses? Well, it often suffers from limited features and infrequent updates. Continuing with that exact same example, we then look outward to the external conditions. The market opportunities here are that users can try the software without any financial commitment, which obviously saves company resources. However, the looming threats in the external environment include fierce competitors with much better tools or the constant, lingering risk of sudden abandonment by the original developer. But here is where so many teams actually drop the ball. A SWOT analysis cannot just be a static list of bullet points on a whiteboard. It must culminate in an actionable strategy for the project team. Strategy is the ultimate conclusion drawn from the SWOT matrix that confidently answers the big question, based on all of this information, what are you actually going to do? To show you what a finished strategy actually looks like, let's read this highly practical strategic conclusion based on our software example. Free project management software has limitations, but can be a good fit for small teams or freelancers. However, it is not a replacement for full-featured software. That right there is how all the survey data, the feature selection, and the SWOT analysis seamlessly come together into one practical, clear directive. And this just maps out the complete logical progression of the whole framework. It literally takes you from a raw, untested idea all the way to a data-backed strategy. Step 1, you define your purpose and survey the right people. Step 2, you analyze their responses neutrally. Step 3, you make confident feasibility decisions on your features. And Step 4, you develop a solid SWOT strategy to guide the entire project forward. Which brings us to the end of our explainer. I want to leave you with one final, incredibly important question for your next kickoff meeting. Are you building what your users actually want, or just what you think they want? Let the data speak for itself. Thanks so much for joining us, and keep learning.